Hello everyone. Today we will be talking about food chain and food web. So the picture here itself, you can see the chain. That means they are linked. Now, what are linked? The organisms are linked, and they are linked via food. And food web is basically where you see a spider web. It's just like network, interconnected network. So we will see here in subsequent slides where there are interconnection between different organisms in terms of food. So basically, it's food chain means transfer of food energy from the producers through a series of organisms. So in the basically we are talking about eat and being eaten. This is how nature works. Now here you can see a grass is there. Those are the primary producer. Fixes the solar energy, then it carries out the process of photosynthesis and prepare foods and all. Now, what happens is grass is being eaten by a grasshopper. That is your primary consumer. Then the grasshopper is being eaten by a secondary consumer. That is your frog. And frog is eaten by a snake. So that is a tertiary consumer. And then we have a hawk is there, which is your final consumer or top apex predator also sometimes we call, and ultimately they die off and they decompose. So basically you see how food is being transferred from one organism to another. That is basically a food chain. Now what are the characteristics of a food chain? If you see, it consists of series of populations which you have seen in the previous slide, and they are related by being eating and being eaten, and it's generally straight and progressive reduction in available biomass. So if you see here, the biomass is, there is a reduction in the biomass level. Now reduction in terms of available biomass, energy and number of individuals with a rise in trophic level. Now, in each trophic level, a lot of biomass is consumed in liberating energy. So, this is basically a rule where when you consume something, you release energy, maybe in terms of heat or respiration. So, that energy is basically a loss, heat loss. Now, major part of energy made available at each trophic level is lost as heat. This is what I said just now, and that is being sustained by producers and consumers. Now, the different types of food chains are grazing food chain, detritus food chain, and parasitic food chain. So we will see one by one. Grazing, as you, the term grazing is there, so it begins in the, you can see here, starts from the living green plants, goes to grazing herbivores and to carnivores. So this is the grazing food chain. You can see the one that we started when we talked about food chain. The grass is being eaten by a grasshopper, then frog, then snake, then vulture, hawk, and all. So that is basically a grazing food chain. So dependent on an influx of solar radiation or solar energy. So plants are the only producers, primary producers that fixes the solar energy. Now most ecosystem in nature have this kind of food chain. Coming to the detritus food chain, detritus means basically dead, which begins with dead organic matter. So begins with dead or detritus or dead organic matter. So detritus and decomposers feed on it. Now food energy present in detritus passes into them. Now, in terrestrial ecosystem, a large amount of energy passes through detritus food chain. Now, if you see here in the example, you see the detritus, the dead and the decomposed organism is being fed by primary detritus. It can be earthworm, and then earthworm is being eaten by a rat or other earthworm feeding organisms. So basically these are interlinked with the grazing food chain because everything has to die, and once they die, then the detritus chain begins. So they are interlinked. Coming to the parasitic food chain, also called as auxiliary food chain, it begins with host and usually ends in a parasite. So yeah, producer is there, so it will end in a parasite, herbivore. So basically diseases and all, mostly they are because of parasites. So this is the example of a parasitic food chain. You see leech and all, in cattle and all, they'll get different types of parasites, hookworms and all, they end in a parasite. So that could be an example. So whatever example I am giving here, it's not that you have to write exactly the same, or basically you did not produce the same example. You can come up with your own example, and that will be very nice because that will give a clear grasp of your concept. Now food web. So basically what we have seen in food chain, that one organism is being eaten by others. So we showed a straight cut chain, where food is linked. Now here you can see in this example the green plant is being eaten by a rabbit. So the rabbit can be eaten by a jackal or maybe by a lion. So it's not fixed. Even the goat feeds on grasses. The goat can become a food for the jackal as well as for the lion or maybe other wild cat. So there's interconnection of food. So basically interconnected network of food chain is a food web. So when we started with the presentation, I showed you a spider web. So that could be just to give a grasp of things. What does a web means? So here in terms of food, they are interconnected. What are the characteristics? It is more real than the food chain. Basically, what you see in nature, this is more practical and more realistic than any food chain. Now consists of a number of food chains interlinked at various trophic levels. Trophic levels basically are the levels at which the organisms are placed. Now, food web is not straight, as you have seen, it is interconnected and crisscross. Increases the stability of an ecosystem by providing alternate source of food. And one of the biggest advantages is that it allows the endangered population to grow in size. Suppose if I talk about a maybe just giving a random example, a rabbit is there and tiger only feeds on rabbit, so the rabbit will become extinct in future. Now what happens if the rabbit is not there? If a tiger finds a goat, it will eat goat. So in that way you are helping the rabbit to increase its population size. So that is a biggest advantage. So thank you very much for listening.